Well, welcome back. Now, this week, President Cyril Ramaphosa appointed an inter-ministerial committee chaired by the Department of Labour to urgently compile a report about the recent violent attacks on truck drivers on the country's national highways. Ministers and senior managers of the Departments of Employment and Labour, as well as Home Affairs, Police, Transport and State Security, together with the premiers of KwaZulu-Natal, Premier, I should say, will convene mechanisms to actually try and stop the spate of attacks. More than 30 trucks were petrol bombed in the last week alone, killing and injuring several drivers. Now, yesterday we spoke to the Truckers Association of South Africa, TASA, and Mary Padi, their president, said that these attacks are xenophobic in nature because many of the drivers are foreign nationals and that no merchandise was actually stolen. Minister Thulas Nxesi, the Minister of Employment and Labour, joins us now to discuss this further. Minister, good morning and welcome to Morning Live.
Good morning, Sakina, and thank you to the viewers.
So, Minister, first off, just your assessment of this situation, because many fingers have been pointed at government, at your department, for not arresting this situation sooner.
Well, Sakina, our view as the department, this is just criminal activity, which consists of a variety of what I would say components. There are labor issues, the employment of the foreigners by some companies at lower wages and not respecting the conditions and at the exclusion of the South Africans. That's one issue. And this remains a dominant narrative. But the way this thing has manifested itself, it has become a criminal activity because a lot of drivers, South African or what, have been attacked. And if you listen to the people who are talking now, they are starting to talk about ownership of the companies, that there are no Africans who are part of the ownership and so on. So it's beyond the labor issues. But despite that, Sakina, we have engaged before July, and we had a lot of discussions and the processes which we put in place that we are engaging with the matters. The president had put an inter-ministerial committee of a number of ministers, more than 10, to look into this question. But what we are saying at the moment, before we can talk about that, all of us have to respect the lives. All of us have to respect that people have human rights, regardless of whether they are legal or illegal. And they were saying also to the employers, they need to respect the labor laws. Do not use the foreign workers who are desperate because of instability politically, and some of them were economic migrants. They must not use them as just cheap labor when they know they won't be able to do anything. And we're saying this will definitely undermine the economy of the country.
Now, Minister, you see, this is exactly why people are pointing fingers at your ministry in particular, saying that it's not good enough to say that the employer should abide by the rules of the country, because if it was as simple as that, they would have. And the fact that they are not, and borne out by the conversation yesterday with the president of the Truckers Association of South Africa, TASA, Mary Padi, and she actually confirmed that there is a problem. There are high numbers of foreign nationals employed by some in the industry, sometimes up to 80% in certain instances of the drivers that are employed are foreign nationals. So the question is, what has your department done to ensure that labor laws are actually being followed and abided by with these companies?
Sakina, I must just indicate that prior to around July, that prior to the lockdown, we had conducted joint campaigns in the companies, working together with the police, with the Home Affairs and SARS. And 33 companies were charged and even fined who had not respected the laws the way they had employed the people. And unfortunately, because of the lockdown, there was a lull in that particular campaign. And we've agreed that we're resuscitating that campaign. But what we are also saying, we would need to make sure that all the employers have to belong to the associations, because the associations are able to put the very strict rules as much as we are also putting our own rules. And what has happened now, it's a few of these elements from the side of the employers who do not want to associate themselves with the associations. And we have agreed in the meeting yesterday that we are going to be making, maybe we have to use the legislation to force the people to register with the associations so that the associations can be able to monitor everybody else. But we must indicate that the IMC has started to the work, is going to present to the cabinet the proposal. And remember, we're not only dealing with the trucking industry. We are dealing with the farming, we're dealing with the security industry, we're dealing with the hospitality, the restaurants, and in all these industries, you find that the employers are doing exactly what is alleged to be done in trucking. So as government, we can't treat these one by one. We have to treat all of them and come with an encompassing policy or regulations. And we are almost there. And we've been briefing these unions all along. We've been briefing them at the stage where we were, and so on and so on. And even yesterday, when we had this meeting, or day before, we all agreed, but some of them decide not to come to the sessions deliberately, so that they continue with this criminal activity and with this particular chaos.
So, Minister, when you said earlier, you said you've appealed to these employers not to use foreign nationals as cheap labor. That in itself is a tacit admission of the existence of the problem. And are you not concerned that by admitting this and what we've seen already, you've said earlier that this is pure criminality, and yes, it is on the one hand, but on the other hand, that is a bit reductionist of what the actual problem is, because the problem stems from a problem that exists with regard to people not abiding by labor regulations, and then there is perhaps an element of criminal elements hijacking legitimate concerns. But what are the solutions going forward? Because unfortunately, people are losing their lives. Some have even called this economic sabotage. What are the solutions, especially that you have discussed in that task team, the Inter-ministerial task team that has been set up?
Let me say this, Sakina, that South Africa is a leading services destination. It's a regional manufacturing hub, and the incidents of these attacks or attacks on the trucks which deliver the goods and these services are the lifeblood of the South African economy. They must be condemned, because what it happens is, as part of the region which is striving to take opportunities which are available soon, these are which are going to be available. We have just signed the African Continental Free Trade Area. And then the destruction and the attacks on our transport infrastructure, they only serve to undermine our economic reconstruction and the recovery plans. And this is supposed to be boosting the economy. We're talking about access to the market of more than a billion people, which when we're talking about in terms of the GDP, we're talking about 2.6 billion. So South Africa cannot be an island. The matter is complex. Secondly, Sakina, the foreign nationals, legal or not illegal, they do have rights under the various conventions, even under our own constitutions. There has been a lot of cases which have gone into court. They do have the rights, even the right to work. So the matter is complex. That's why we're starting to think about the idea of maybe putting quotas in certain areas, to say maybe we can put about 80% or 90%, and we're not sure that you can totally block the foreign nationals from being employed, because it is unconstitutional, but also we would just be what we call violating a number of the international conventions which we have signed at the UN, at the ILO, and a number of multilateral forums. So, but we need to have an understanding that it must not be abused as it is abused now, especially in what we call low-skilled areas, when there are South Africans, there needs to be an understanding that if you're talking about the special skills or a particular percentage you can be able to employ. So we're looking into those options, but it has to be crafted carefully, and you have to look into the legal implications and the constitutional implications, because somebody jumps into court and wins that case and reverse everything. So that's why it's so complex.
And in fact, to add to some of the problems you may have in that regard, not problems per se, maybe challenges, as you say, you need to be alive to what the stipulations are in these various conventions in drafting the said legislation. But also you need to be sufficiently capacitated as a department to actually ensure that whatever legislation exists is actually followed through by the employers. Do you have sufficient capacity? The last time we spoke to the department, you didn't. So how are you going to go about policing what is currently in place and what you envisage to put in place?
Sakina, there are close to 3 million employers in this country. We will not even have 1 million or 1,000 inspectors. But we always rely on the goodwill of the employers who are going to be able to understand the law. But also, we rely on the shop stewards, on the factory floor, on the unions when we have to work together with them. We think that we can be able to deal with this. And we believe that people not need to be forced. They need to understand the law. We continue trying to do that. But also, Sakina, let me just give you another angle. Already there's an SMS which is circulating, claiming to be coming from some foreign drivers, indicating that South Africans who know that they are outside, they must know that they are going to be attacked. They are going to take those trucks and put them into the borders and call the South African drivers to come and fetch them. Already we have a diaspora drivers association or a forum who are saying they are here to defend the foreign nationals or the foreign drivers, which shows that the issue is very complex. And those who are coming with violence, they are playing with fire. That's why we have to be hard with them. But we have created a platform where we are negotiating this particular issue. Now the COVID, we are at level 1. We can be able to meet and continue with our discussions. But despite that, we have been continuing virtually. Even yesterday, we met virtually with the different people. Some refused to come. So we are going to be dealing with this matter, also looking at our capacity. We've just increased our capacity of the inspectors with about 500 people who were employed even during this time of COVID. So we're going to deal with the matter. But you must understand that the reason why this issue of drafting the regulations or coming up with the policy or legislation is because the matter is so complex. You need to look into all these legal implications, as you were saying about the international. We have to involve labor experts who have dealt with the international issues, constitutional experts, including our own people who are drafting this.
And Minister, as you said, just a final question. It's not just this issue that you are obviously seized with. The SABC. So earlier this week, you had a meeting with other stakeholders, including the Minister of Communications, Stella Ndabeni-Abrahams, and I spoke to her earlier on in the week. Just want to find out from your side, as the Minister of Labour and Employment, what is the latest with regard to the situation at the SABC? And of course, also, there was talk about the Department of Labour actually making available 700 million rand for the SABC. The veracity of that particular report as well.
We are waiting, Sakina, for the outcome of the discussions. We are aware that the strike is continuing, but our view is simple. Whether the strike is continuing or not, the negotiations should continue. Whether there's a strike, others have gone to court. The reality is that everything is going to be solved. People coming back to the table and negotiating very hard. And they can only be able to resolve that problem if there are compromises on both sides. And I've been able to say to the unions, you can't run away from negotiating retrenchments. This is a pattern of the history of the labor movement. If the retrenchments are coming, you have to, because if you don't negotiate them, the employer can simply follow all the processes properly or can lose in a court and come back and correct all those processes and then continues with the retrenchment. And then you are not able to save some of the jobs which you can be able to save. Because if it's talking about 400, once there's hard engagement, you might be able to save others or save all of them, start talking about retraining, diverting people into other areas and so on. That's what I've said to the unions. But also I've said to the employer, the starting point is to do a proper skills audit. And that skills audit, whoever does that, there must be a confidence from all the parties that those people are doing the proper work. You can't just do it alone. It starts from there, and then you start looking at the options and so on. That should be a collaborative effort. But if you want to move unilaterally, everything is not going to be legitimate. We're going to force them to do that. And we have said, given the state of the negotiations where they are now, we think that must be conducted under a very experienced facilitator, and we have been able to put a lot of names, but the CCMA can be able to put those. A facilitator, not mediating now, but just to facilitate between the two parties to say, here are the issues, not the fight. And would have loved that whilst this process is continuing, and I've heard that the issue now is 30 days. We are saying 30 days or no 30 days, but negotiations should continue. Even that issue of the 30 days must be part of the engagement and the discussions in those negotiations. That is our stance on that. But if all fails, we might be forced to intervene in a different way. But for now, we're intervening so that the parties themselves are able to deal with those issues. But you'll appreciate, Sakina, that you have a line functioning ministry. I always leave it to that. I work at the back and work with the minister, and we meet with the unions. But I think the person who should be in the front line is the line functioning ministry. 700
million, do you have that to give to the SABC?
We have indicated, and we are raising a very interesting issue, Sakina. We have indicated that one of the reasons why we could not continue with the temporal TERS, that UIF scheme, which was meant for the relief during the COVID when it was hitting high, we have said we still have another assignment, a big assignment. Retrenchments, when a number of companies have collapsed, are going to be a reality. How do we deal with that? So that money which has been put aside for training should be utilized for that. And we can't blow that particular money. We can't say we have 700 million. We won't be able to say that. Everything has to be assessed. A company must be assessed in terms of its turnaround strategy. And then on the basis of that, we are able to say, our experts are able to say, no, we can be able to help and train people. We have so much which we can be able to dedicate to you. We're not just going to come up with a figure anyway. And we think that all parties, including the employer, including the communications and digital technology department, must come and pull the resources and put them together.
Minister Thulas Nxesi, thanks for your time this morning. And that, of course, the Minister of Employment and Labour, Thulas Nxesi, talking to us about the developments, the latest in the trucking industry, as well as what's happening at the SABC. And with that, Valen standing by to bring us some